Hello, it's me back once again with another sit down chit chat style video. Is everyone excited? Because I totally am. If this is your first time on my channel, then do me a huge favor and press the subscribe button, because I guarantee you want to see my face in the future and laugh at the joke that is my life. So it's a very good incentive, isn't it? So today's video, as you can probably guess by the title, is going to be another one about Oxford University. Being more specific, I'm going to be spilling all the tea and discussing my first year experience. My previous Oxford video was all about my application process, all about my interview experience and why I had to apply twice. So if you're interested in kind of Oxford and study related content, that's something else that you could check out. So before we get started with the actual video, now that I've got all the self-promo out of the way. So my name is Maria, I am 20 years old and I am a history undergraduate at the University of Oxford. I have just finished my first year and I will be starting my second year in October. This is actually a topic that a lot of people have requested me to talk about, because obviously the new university application cycle is coming up very soon, and seeing as there are a lot of myths and misconceptions about universities such as Oxford and Cambridge, I thought that I would just give my side of the story and talk honestly about my experience. And I guess this goes without saying, but this is only my experience. I'm just one student doing one subject at one specific college, which is St. Hugh's. So obviously everyone's experience is going to be different based on subject and based on college and, you know, how long they've been there and their previous educational background and all of that. So yeah, just take everything with a pinch of salt, I suppose, but that goes for everything that you see on the internet. First thing that I'm going to be speaking about is the academic side of things, which is obviously the most important aspect of university. So I thought that I would start with that. So obviously the style of academic work that you do and how much you do varies a lot between individuals and varies between subjects. So for example, people that do more science subjects and maths and engineering and that sort of thing, that's not as essay-based as something like history. Those people tend to have a lot of intense contact hours where there's tutorials or lectures or labs and all of that. They tend to spend a lot of time away from college and essentially, you know, have full-on 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 working days. On the other hand, humanities students tend to spend a lot more time writing essays and working very independently in libraries and in their room to get those essays finished. So for example, for me, I only had between 1 and 2 lectures every week and between 1 and 2 tutorials, depending on how many essays I was writing in a given week. So there was always this running joke that basically history students had no work and we could just chill out while, you know, everybody else was in lectures and actually doing proper academic work. And that's kind of how it may seem if you just look at our timetable and the amount of contact hours that we have, but we're supposed to do the equivalent amount of work that the other students do just on our own, if that makes sense. So for example, if we went to a lecture, we go in there with the expectation of it barely scratching the surface and kind of giving us the starting points around which we could then do our own independent reading. You know, we had these massive reading lists and also extra reading that we had to do in order to get a broader overview of each topic. I have found my course very enjoyable. There were obviously modules that I didn't really like as much as the others, and even in the modules that I did enjoy, there were certain essays where I was a bit like, meh, this isn't really my type of thing, but that's kind of expected with every subject. Nobody dislikes that course to the point where they find it unbearable, and I think the reason for that is that you get a lot of choice. So even if you have specific requirements, such as for history, we have to cover specific zones in the world and we have to cover specific, we have different period requirements, but within those we can kind of choose the sort of thing we focus on, so that's social history, political history, kind of based on our preferences, and you get a lot of choice in exams in terms of essay questions, so that's pretty much going to be something for everyone when you do those. Workload is obviously the big thing that everybody talks about when Oxford and Cambridge are concerned, so I kind of have a feeling that everybody goes into Oxford and applies to Oxford with the intention of doing a lot of work and knowing that the workload is going to be quite intense. I mean, our terms are only 8 weeks long, which is not that much in comparison to maybe other universities, but they are so full of content and just non-stop work and just having to, you know, kind of push through each week and get the work done. But that being said, I never found the work to be so unbearable that I couldn't keep up with it, or that I didn't have time for anything else. So I still managed to do my Instagram, and you know, I still managed to go to the gym and cook for myself. And I think the key is that as long as you stay really organized and you know that, you know, writing your essay is kind of your priority for the week, or getting your work done, also starting as early as the work is set, that's also something that I think helped me out a lot, because I am not someone that works really well at the last minute. I know that loads of people kind of like that intense last minute pressure, but I find that I just kind of go into a bit of a nervous breakdown if I try to do that. And also, it's not like school where they lock you up for a certain number of hours and make you do a certain amount of work. You can pretty much choose how many hours you put in, and that's going to reflect on the grades that you get. Speaking of grades, and another major way that university differs from school is that it's much harder to get, you know, top results. So this is something that a lot of people struggle with when they go into Oxford or Cambridge. So they might be a student that's used to, you know, getting 90% in all of their exams and kind of performing at the top of their class. But that's not going to automatically translate into them getting firsts at university, because the style of work and the standards are so different. You're kind of treated as a serious academic, and you're kind of judged against that benchmark. So it's very rare for students to, you know, get above 73, 75, even with an exceptional amount of effort. The one thing that I really like about studying at Oxford, and it's one of the reasons as to why I applied in the first place, and that's the tutorial system, where a couple of times a week you're basically taught in small groups between 1 and 3 people, and it's just you and your tutor, and you write an essay before, or do a piece of work before your tutorial, and then you come in and you kind of have a discussion around it. So my experience with this system has been really good. I have really loved all of my tutors. Have all been very professional. They seem like they really cared about their students. Then again, it can be a bit hit and miss, because I know that some of my friends have had bad tutor experiences, so it really does depend on how well you get on with them and whether their teaching style suits your learning style. Also, there is a lot of support available, and they take the progress and the academic well-being of each student really seriously. So that's another thing that has been really positive in my experience. The next thing that I'm going to discuss is living and accommodation. And actually, when I move back to university in October, I am going to do an accommodation and room tour to kind of go into this in a bit more detail, so be sure to stay tuned for that. That's going to be very exciting. I'm very excited to start doing uni vlogs, to be honest. It's going to be a great time. So I don't know, I have to say, I don't really know very much about how it works in other colleges, but basically in your first year you get assigned a room quite randomly before you actually arrive at uni. I don't know how this works and how they do it, but yeah, it does seem to be quite random, unless you have a medical condition, or you, for whatever reason, put in a request for a special room, and they're really good at doing that as well if you need special living arrangements. So overall, I was very happy with my accommodation. Obviously, people did encounter issues such as, you know, washing machines breaking down and things not always running very smoothly, but yeah, but overall, all of the accommodation that I've seen around Oxford has been of a very decent standard. So yeah, that's another really positive. My makeup didn't really go too well today either, which for some reason it's fine every single day apart from when I decide to get on the camera and film for YouTube. That's just my luck, isn't it? I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, so the next category of discussion is going to be social life. Okay, so the next category of discussion about my Oxford experience is going to be the social life side of things. And oh boy, this is a very tricky one to talk about, and don't allow what I'm about to say about my personal experience to kind of put you off, because overall, from what I've seen and from what I know as a fact, is that social life at Oxford is amazing. It's very easy to make friends, and there is literally something there available for everyone in a social sense. But because this video is centered around my experience as well as a general observation and overview, I am going to talk about how my social life journey progressed from when I started to when I finished this year. So to give a little bit of background, when I was much younger, you know, when I was 11, 12, 13, I had a very sort of, well, the same personality as I do now. I was very sort of crazy, very spontaneous, very outgoing. I had a weird sense of humor. I was just that sort of person. But then I got ill with an eating disorder when I was in my early teenage years, and that kind of stripped away any aspect of my personality that was positive. And I was just kind of, okay, this is so dramatic, but I was left as a shell of my former self. That's very difficult to say, but it summarizes what I was like very effectively. My mental health wasn't the best, to say the least, for many years, and even after that got progressively better and I recovered from my eating disorder and all of my other issues started to get better as well, I had kind of lost touch with the person that I was before all of that started. And I also took a gap year, which kind of put me out of touch with society for that entire year. I didn't really talk to many people. I didn't really socialize. So when I started university, I assumed that who I was as a person, I assumed that I was very shy and that I didn't really care for making friends, that I didn't want to go out, I didn't really want to do anything fun, and that I was just going to lock myself up and stay in my room doing work and just spending time alone and whatever. I got there, I didn't go to any of the events during Freshers Week, which I kind of put on to allow you to make friends and kind of find a group or just people that you think that you will enjoy spending time with for the rest of the year. I didn't do any of that. I just, you know, as I said, spent lots of time alone in my room. And then I wondered why I felt miserable all the time. And the reason for that is that I do like spending time by myself. If that goes too far in that direction and I don't socialize for a really long period of time, that makes me absolutely miserable. It literally makes me go crazy with misery. I need to talk to people. I like spending time with people, and even if I'm not the sort of person that needs to be around other people and needs to have, you know, this massive social circle, I still need to, you know, have conversation and do fun things and all of that. So while I was really enjoying all of the other aspects of university, I didn't really have the social life that I hoped I would be able to have, or that I deep down wished to have while observing other people. Then unfortunately over the winter my mental health deteriorated quite a lot, and I will talk about this in more detail in the mental health part that I'm going to be covering a bit later on. Basically that kind of turned into a vicious cycle where I didn't want to go out and spend time with people because I felt so miserable, and then I felt even more miserable because I wasn't spending time with people and I was by myself all the time. And unfortunately, long story short, I started therapy once again. I got better over the Easter break, and I started Trinity term, which is our final term of the year. I kind of made the decision to turn my social life around, and on the one hand I was quite worried, but then I said to myself, who cares if people have made friends already? Who thinks that if they're a bit surprised by you suddenly putting yourself out there? At the end of the day, I don't want to look back on a university experience where the only thing I remember is being on my own and miserable, locked up in my room all the time. So that's what I did, and my social life got progressively better during that last term, and I kind of saw what I was missing out on, and I kind of saw why people didn't want to go away from uni and kind of leave all of their friends behind and all of the exciting things that go on when you kind of really immerse yourself into the university experience. If you're willing to do so, and obviously at uni you have to try a bit harder and put yourself out there a bit more in order to make friends, but in general it is very easy, especially around colleges, which kind of form mini communities, and that's a really easy way to kind of see people on a daily basis and really get to know them and spend time with them, which is really nice. People in Oxford do really enjoy drinking and going out, and there is actually a different club night for every day of the week, which is good because there's something for everyone. But if you're someone that doesn't enjoy drinking, then a lot of people do still go out but just don't have alcohol while they're there, or there are a lot of other things that you can do that don't revolve around alcohol in general. And yeah, I know plenty of people that are complete teetotals and still have a really rich social life despite the fact that they choose not to do that. And on a similar note, just in general, you can kind of pick and choose how much you socialize or how much you don't socialize, whether you're a part of a group or whether you just have, you know, different people that you talk to. So now I'm going to discuss mental health, as I said before, and kind of the general atmosphere of the university. So first of all, pretty much everyone that I've spoken to, regardless of how confident they seem, pretty much everyone there struggles with imposter syndrome, which is completely understandable, and this is very common in sort of Oxbridge and just other top universities. It's very easy to feel out of place and feel like you don't belong there and feel like you're constantly not working hard enough, or that you're not living up to either your own or other people's expectations. And this is one of the many reasons why, well, there's literally no sugarcoating this. Universities such as Oxford and Cambridge do have a very bad record in terms of student mental health. There are many different reasons for that, academic pressure being just one of them. But that being said, especially around Oxford, there is a lot of help available, and they do take it very, very seriously. They are aware of how much of an issue this is. So, as I said, my own mental health got quite bad over the winter. I was going through a very difficult time, and the thing is, the reason as to why I was struggling, it had literally nothing to do with university. I mean, obviously being quite socially withdrawn, that made it a bit worse because I felt like I had no one to talk to and nobody that I could trust with something as deep as what I was struggling with. In order to get better, I actually ended up talking to my old therapist, just for the reason because she knew me quite well. And we've been working together for years, and she knew kind of the nature of my issue, and the type of therapy that I needed was very specific. On the other hand, had I not had that therapist, had I turned to the university, they would have been more than happy to provide me with the help that I needed or refer me elsewhere. So yeah, as with everywhere else, there is a lot of room for improvement, but they do try their best to kind of be there for students and take you seriously, as long as you reach out to them in the first place, which is obviously very difficult to do, but they do try their best to make the university a comfortable environment where you feel like you can safely go and talk to someone if you're struggling with anything of any nature. So on kind of a similar note, something that I get asked about quite a lot is how I found the adjustment to being in Oxford as somebody that doesn't come from a private education background. So I went to a very average secondary school, I went to a very average college, and I think that feeling left out and just marginalized, and it's one of the things that people from state schools get quite worried about, and this may deter them from applying to Oxford or Cambridge in the first place. So I do have to say that this really depends on the subject and the college. So certain colleges are much more notorious for having a classist, pretentious asshole reputation than others. St. Hugh's tends to be on kind of the other side of the spectrum. Everyone is very accepting of everyone, regardless of their educational background. And just in general, everywhere that you go, there will be pretentious assholes, but in my experience, it was not anywhere near as bad as I expected. It definitely 100% was much worse at interviews, but that is the stage where all the actual pretentious wannabes kind of got filtered out. On the other hand, I do have to say that that whilst I'm not from a private education background, I didn't go anywhere special to receive my secondary education, whilst it's very, very rare that somebody will directly, you know, insult you because of your background. This is something that I've experienced. It's still very easy to feel aware of it and feel left out of certain things and certain conversations, etc. So yeah, there's kind of two sides to that aspect of being at Oxford. But 100% don't allow that to deter you from applying, because at the end of the day, once you get there, everyone is on an equal playing field, and your background will in no way determine how happy you are at Oxford and how well you perform academically, which is actually something that I'm going to be talking about in a second in the Q&A portion of this video, which is already, I think, like 30 minutes long or something ridiculous. So well done, Maria, for keeping things concise as usual. So I did one of those question and answer things on my Instagram story a couple of days ago, and I will just be going through and answering some of your guys' questions. I probably won't get through all of them, but yeah, I will try to get through some of the more popular ones. How much sleep do you get as an Oxford student? And related to that, how many hours do you study every day? So I feel like there's this massive misconception that students that attend these high-end universities, you know, survive on 4 hours of sleep and live off a diet of protein shakes and coffee, but that definitely doesn't have to be the case. I feel like that only happens if you're really disorganized with your time, and then it gets to deadlines and you find yourself, you know, rushing around at the last minute and putting all-nighters to get your essay finished. But there is absolutely no need to, you know, do a ridiculous amount of hours every single day and get no sleep and miss out on other aspects of your life. Even if you get a decent amount of sleep, well, if you do get a decent amount of sleep, you're actually more likely to perform better academically, because then you're going to feel, you know, 100% and actually be able to concentrate on what you're doing. So personally, I get between 6 and 7 hours, because I mean, that's always been the case even before I started university. That's personally what my body needs. Other people get more, other people get less, so it's just kind of what you need to support your own personal lifestyle. And yeah, I definitely wouldn't listen to the people that brag about, you know, getting 3 hours of sleep and hustling 24/7, because they're most likely exaggerating, and if they're not, they're in for some nasty health conditions in the long run. So that's the thesis. How much is tuition, and was the application process complicated? So as a UK student, I am paying 9,000 and something. I think it's slightly over £9,000 a year, but I do get a government loan, so I get that throughout my entire 3-year degree, and then I have to pay that off once I'm earning over a certain amount. I think it's slightly more for international students, but yeah, that's how much I and other UK students have to pay for our tuition. And I will probably at some point do a more detailed Oxford application tips and tricks video, but basically there are definitely certain nuances to the application process, and there are certain things that you have to do that differ from other universities. But in general, it's not impossible, even to the extent that if you're applying with no guidance, as long as you kind of read through all of their online material and the help that's available, it is very doable. And because they're looking for your natural potential, regardless of how much external help you're getting, they don't want to make it unnecessarily complicated in order to give everyone a fair chance of getting in and showing how well they could do if they do end up getting in. That didn't make any sense. That was such a confusing sentence. I just got in, but with the minimum grades. Will I struggle? First of all, I want to say huge congratulations on getting in, and in order to answer your question, I will say that I can definitely say that you struggling will not necessarily be the case. There is very little correlation between the grades that people get at school versus how they perform at university, because the style of learning and the style of essay writing and just the overall experience of being at uni is very different. There are plenty of people that, you know, get all A stars at GCSEs and all A stars at A level and end up struggling once they get to Oxford or Cambridge or any other universities. One of the major reasons for that is the fact that you are expected to be so independent, and if somebody is used to kind of being guided through how exactly to get, 90% in a given exam. You don't really get that. It's much more subjective and much more centered around how many hours you're willing to put in and how much you're willing to work on yourself. So I definitely wouldn't let your grades make you anxious, and just take the university experience as it comes, and I'm sure that you are going to have a brilliant time. Do all dorms have good cooking facilities, and do you ever attend fancy college dinners? So in regards to the first question, it definitely depends. Some colleges have much better kitchens, some have much worse and smaller kitchens. So I was quite lucky because our kitchen was quite big and we only had to share it between 8 people. So obviously each person had a lot of space for themselves, and you weren't fighting over the equipment and the oven and that sort of thing with like 50 other people at the same time. But I do know that other people in other buildings around the college, they had to share between a much bigger floor, or the kitchen wasn't as big. So it really is a hit and miss situation. I know that some of my other friends have very limited cooking equipment, others have amazing kitchens. So yeah, if that's something that's important to you, I would definitely look at the college beforehand and maybe come and visit and see it for yourself before deciding where you want to apply. In terms of the fancy formal dinners, no, I haven't really been to many of them, just because I have been to a couple and I did find them very enjoyable. It's definitely a big part of Oxford, of the Oxford experience, and if you go there, then I would definitely recommend going to at least a couple. But the reason as to why I don't go to more is because it's simply for the reason that I do like cooking for myself and I like eating in a very specific way. They do have vegan and gluten-free options obviously, but I feel much more at ease when I'm cooking for myself in the kitchen using my own ingredients, and that's just me. But that's not to say that I wouldn't recommend them to anyone that enjoys that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that's going to be it for this video. If you have any more questions, then either leave them in the comments or reach out to me directly, either through Instagram or through email. I'm more likely to respond on there. And yeah, I hope you found this interesting and useful, and if you're thinking of applying, if you have the Oxbridge dream, then obviously go for it. And yeah, I will see you guys in my next video. I better go and get packing for Amsterdam now, because I really want to improve my reputation of being probably the most disorganized person that everyone that knows me happens to know. So yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, and yeah, I will see you very soon. And why is every outro of every video that I do so awkward? I need to work on this as well. Bye.